Okay, so this is going to be a long episode. We have been trying to edit episode 2 for
Months.
over a year.
Yes.
Actually, a year. I get super busy at work, and we neglected our first series quite a bit. We did an intro that we both really liked, and we did an episode 1 that was okay. And we found that as we've been going along, we're building all kinds of basically media for future series, but we have all this media towards the back half of this series itself, where we went out west for this crazy trip. And it's all great, but to get to it, we felt like we really needed to get you into the point where you knew what was going on with the trailer. How did a Dutchman turn into the turd? So this episode is literally just us talking, mostly me. Sorry about that. Yeah, not you. Okay, so anyways, it is mostly us talking to the camera, telling you what the background story is so that you get an idea of how we acquired the trailer itself, why we acquired the trailer, what our big plan was, and how we got to where we are today. I even tried to incorporate a bunch of this stuff into day 2 so that it would make sense, and it ended up being a forever and a day long episode, and we just said no. We're going to make this a basically background, and then you have an idea of exactly what's going on, and day 2 will resume after this. Some of the backstory for this day 2 is that my work was sending me to Oklahoma, middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, for some training for about 4 months. Before that, they sent me down to San Antonio, Texas. And we decided that what we thought was going to be the best thing to do was we were going to do those 2 trainings back to back, and we were going to take the turd with us. Long story short, life happens. That did not work out. So the Frau, myself, the 3 Great Danes, and baby Jenny, itsy bitsy baby Jenny at that time, all went down in just the truck to San Antonio and stayed in a house. And during that time, we were pretty much fairly new parents, and Jenny did not get great sleep. Marion sleeps horribly to begin with at all times, so Marion got even worse sleep, and by the end of a month in San Antonio, it was actually 3 weeks?
Yeah.
It was closer to 3 weeks in San Antonio. Marion was completely wiped. Mentally drained, completely wiped. And decided, no. Even during the swap out, she did not want to go back up, grab the turd, and go to Oklahoma. She was just too exhausted, too beat, and we were not going to be able to make that work. So I left the turd in storage and drove to Oklahoma by myself without the camper. All right, that being said, we go ahead and make a decision that we're going to definitely do the big trip after my training anyway. Yeah, I realized that I was already, whatever it was, 1,500 miles into the west, so I was going to have to drive 1,500 miles back east, northeast, pick up the Frau, the turd, the Danes, and the baby, and drive right back where I was because we were flying my mother into Oklahoma City. So I go ahead, I make a beeline as efficiently as possible back to Niagara Falls, head to storage, pick up the turd. Go to pick up the turd, and I find that it's got some water damage. It already had a little bit, which we had repaired the seep in the past, and it had fared very poorly during the winter. I was down in San Antonio and Altus for the winter, and it had fared fairly poorly through the winter. I got back. I was driving the 4.5 miles back to the house from storage, and in my rear view mirror, my side view mirror, I could see the wall of the master bedroom billowing out. And I'm not exaggerating, it was a full 1.5 to 2 feet pushed out. Looked like you were blowing up a balloon. So I was a little nervous about that. I reduced my speed so there wasn't as much air pressure against it. What I was most worried about is the window in that wall was the central part of the billow. And I was afraid that the window was just going to pop right out. So we pulled it back to the house. I got there safely, went inside and inspected it to find that the inside wall studs and basically the plywood or the lawan that is behind the wallpaper of that paneling, if you will, had essentially dissolved in the water. I mean, they just barely existed at all. When I touched on the paper, it felt like there was zero resistance whatsoever. It just flexed like there was no tomorrow. So if that wasn't good enough, the floor all in that area was fairly soft also. And the floor in the living room that I knew I was going to have to reinforce anyway was now completely soft and for a good distance. So the first thing I decided to address was the floor in the living room. I pulled back the carpeting, and the plywood that was underneath there was basically mush. So I ripped out the plywood that was basically mush. I put all new studs in there so that it was nice and firm. And it was funny. I thought that it had become so soft that the floor was sagging. So when I put the new studs in, I made them nice and square with the rest of the floor. And I put the new flooring down, and it looked great. You remember, Shots? I mean, you walked in there, it was solid, it was smooth, it was awesome, better than ever. And that's when I was in taking a shower that night, which apparently is where I do a lot of my thinking. And I realized that that's my original plan was to rip the wall out. Some outtakes of Jenny. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so I go ahead and I think about this. Or my original plan was I was just going to rip the wall off, put new studs in there, and put a new wall on. Mind you, I had 2 days total to do all this work that I didn't anticipate doing, and pack the camper and get on the road to go meet my mother in Oklahoma City. So, it's actually another day. I figured we'll follow up on a couple things. The first thing that we'll follow up with is I was talking about being in the shower and thinking of how to frame up the wall on the turd. Hi, baby Jenny. I'm Daddy Dwyer. Mwah. Still Daddy Dwyer. I'll post a link to that video. Let's see. I think it's up there. It'll be right
Maybe
here. It might be right here.
In the general area.
Somewhere across the top here. We're gonna figure out where that is. Anyway, long story short, we went ahead and we framed up the bedroom wall, pieced it together, and screwed it all together without screwing it to the wall. Then I placed all that skeleton work up against the wall, and I marked where all that skeleton work was on the wall itself, and then took the framework down. I then drilled from the inside of the trailer through the outside wall, and then put the framework back up, and from the outside wall into the framework that I just built, I pilot hole drilled where I was going to put all of the screws. I then used 3-inch stainless steel screws with stainless steel escutcheons, the little tiny jobbers that were about, I think, 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and essentially screwed the outside wall up into that framework that I built on the inside. That made the wall very rigid. It was not billowing out anymore. The window was rock solid at that point because I framed right around the window. And then we were basically ready to go. The floor was done. The wall was done. The wall wasn't super pretty, but I gotta be honest with you, multiple people had looked inside, and until I pointed it out, nobody realized, oh my God, that's the studs of the wall are on the outside of the wall, which is technically the inside of the camper, not in between the wall paneling and the outside aluminum. So that worked rather well, and I went to pull the slide in. So I should tell you a little tiny bit of background of the slide. The person I bought the slide from has a family that owned an RV store, and that family wanted to get into RVing, they thought, and they went to their family's house out in Indiana, and they said, hey man, we'd like to rent an RV for the year because I'm not 100% certain we want to do this. The family said, oh, okay, you don't want to do that. The cost involved, yada, yada, yada. If you're only worried about it being a year, yeah, I just want to make sure we're going to be into this. So they went to their lemon lot and said, hey man, a customer owned this Dutchman, beautiful Dutchman, and it really was a beautiful Dutchman, but when they put it away, they didn't clear the top of the camper, and I think they said there was a upside down frisbee on the slide. They brought the slide in, which now held the seal up. So when it rained and snowed all winter, all that water got inside the camper and started doing a little bit of damage.
Somebody needs a potty break.
All right. Google, or I'm sorry, YouTube America, we are going to have a potty break. So we're not interested in doing all that work. Why don't you just take this? And I know they basically got it for almost nothing, but they had to buy a good hitch, which they did, and they had to put a set of tires on it because, of course, they were old tires, and a couple, the standard nitnoid things, the stinky slinky, etc., etc. So they went ahead and took it. They used it for a solid year, and he told me when I said, oh my God, I love it, yeah. I said, I've been looking for one. I owned a couple other trailers in my past, and the last one that I had, I was constantly nagged about getting rid of, and right before my wife came over from Germany, yeah, that'd be the one. I said to her, hey, do you ever have any interest in camping whatsoever? And I sent her a picture of the Dutchman, shockingly, fifth wheel that I had at the house in Pennsylvania. I hadn't used it in 4 years due to basically my work. And she said, oh God, no, I don't think I have any interest in doing that at all. But she was thinking like a German. And Germans don't really have big campers, and they don't travel the way that we do. They do things a little bit different. It's starting to get a little bit more Americanized, I would say, over there, but still, most of them are teeny tiny campers.
And tent camping.
And tent camping. And she said she did some of that as a young girl, or younger lady, and was not interested. Fine. So, got rid of the camper. Brought her to the United States. Not an exaggeration in the slightest bit. I picked her up from the airport. And when I picked her up from the airport, without exaggeration, we were on our way back to the house in Niagara Falls. And on the way, it's only a 20-minute drive from the airport to the house in the falls. We pass. Okay, so we're pulled over so that Jenny can go potty. As you can see, the twins will pick up your head, baby girl. Mwah. The twins are in the front of the truck today, just so I can get a little bit more time with them before I go back to work tomorrow. I'm going back to work. Anywho, so we bring Marian over from Germany, pick her up from the airport. On the way back to the house in Niagara, we cross over Grand Island. And for those of you that are familiar with Grand Island, there is a amusement park with an RV park in it, Fantasy Island. And when we go ahead and cross over, I pass a small caravan of campers. I want to say that I passed like 3 campers. Marian just popped out to turn the water pump on. 2 thumbs up on the Frau. She's such a tough girl. Love her. However, she made this maneuver. We're driving past them, and there's 3 or 4 pickup trucks with campers on the back of them headed to Fantasy Island. And literally, I pull out and start going past them, and Marian looks at them and goes, "What are those? That looks like fun." Of course, I said to her, well, that's a camper. Do you remember me asking you about 2 weeks ago? Are you sure you have no desire to do anything like that? Oh, yeah. Well, it looks cool. So, at that point, I started looking into cheap campers because I really didn't want to get into another, $30,000 or $60,000 camper and her not really love it. Because, to be honest with you, this lifestyle is not for everybody. I love this boondocking lifestyle. I have zero issue whatsoever parking lot surfing. And I love bebopping around the country to all these crazy places with the camper in tow, being able to take the girls with us. It's awesome. So, in talking to my buddy at work, I just said to him, hey man, I know you weren't certain you were going to keep that camper. If you ever decide to sell it, please let me know. He says, oh dude, you do not want this camper. It's got issues. And I said, dude, I totally know that it's got issues. I'm totally fine with the issues that it has. I'm a really handy kind of guy, and I'm looking for something cheap to test out camping with the wife in this style of camper, so it fits me perfect. I don't care if it falls apart on me 3 years after I buy it. And he goes, 3 years? It should make two. It'll make a year? Okay. I'm okay with that. Totally okay. So I take a look at it. I look at what the damage is. And again, he is not hiding anything. He's, this, that, and the other thing. He tries to sell it, believe it or not, cheaper than I think he really should. He told me he was going to throw it on a Craigslist for one price. And I said, okay, I'll take it for that price. He's like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I'm like, I'll pay that price. So he says, no, way cheaper. We argue back and forth and meet at a price in the middle so that it's fair for him. I think he said he got more than he expected to. And we were ecstatic. So we took it out that first year, and it gave us 0 issues whatsoever. I probably took it out 5 times. We took it to Lake George, and we took it a couple other places. Like I like to go to Majestic Mountain Trails in Bradford, PA, with the motorcycles, and it gave me 0 issues whatsoever. Battery life sucked. I did not own a generator at that point, so that was the one thing. I was boondocking at Majestic Trails, and I didn't know enough about the furnaces. Believe it or not, the first 2 campers I had, one didn't have a furnace at all because it was a little pop-up that didn't even have a furnace, and the next one had one of those old school furnaces that did not use the battery. It was kind of like a metal plate, and it had a little tiny flame that went on the metal plate, and then the plate and the metal plate just radiated the heat out. So it's not exactly running a pilot all night, but that's kind of like what it was. It was a little over a pilot, and that thing worked awesome, but there was no battery use. And after that, I never wintered camped in any of my other campers. Well, when I got to Majestic, it was cold, and I blew through battery fast. Way faster than I ever anticipated. All right, so that being said, it is what it is. It did that. So now fast forward to purchase this thing, use it a couple times, put it into storage, go away for work, come back from work, pick it up. It's got all these issues. I'm like, let's at least get it enough out of it that we take it on this big trip. So we did. And I scabbed it together. Actually, to be honest with you, it was really pretty nice job of fixing it up. The floor was beautiful. The wall was beautiful. We're leaving the next morning. So at about 10 o'clock at night, we have everything put into the camper that we need to put into the camper. And I hit the button to bring the pop out in, the slide in, and it won't come over the new flooring. I cannot fathom what's going on, and I start looking a lot closer, and I realize as I watch it that the slide itself has got a ramp built into the floor of the slide, and it's supposed to kind of pop up on a ramped floor in the camper and slide the rest of the way in. You remember me telling you that I thought it was sagging, so I squared it off. That was awesome. So I had to rip the entire floor back out for a 3rd time in 2 days. And again, we're supposed to leave the next morning. So I ripped that out. I took all of the studs, which technically they're floor joists, but it's tough to call something that small a floor joist, but that's what they are at that point. And I took them all in, and I started cutting them on angles, essentially with a miter saw, and it was the biggest pain in the butt. It took a handful of hours. It was not nearly as beautiful as the first time, but it got us on the road. So that is how the turd started becoming the turd. Before that, we didn't call it the turd at all. We really enjoyed it. We loved it, and we still do. So it became the turd when it became a fix or repair daily. When on the first day I was driving down we were headed to Oklahoma City to find my mother, or to pick her up from the airport, and the first thing that we were doing was we went to a Walmart parking lot, which I've already shown you, on our way to what were we going to? We were going to the Ark Encounter. And when we were on our way there, we didn't quite make it the first day, so we pulled over in that Walmart parking lot, which of course didn't allow parking. I let the dogs get into the camper, at that point and ride in the camper, which was cooler in temperature than the back of the truck, for the 5-minute ride over to Target, which did allow overnight camping. And that was the beginning of the fun. The couch collapsed, and I had to spend the evening rebuilding a couch. So, right, girls? So, I rebuilt a couch, and the next day, I also had an LED light. That night, the other issue that we had was, over the winter, a spider had gone in and made a nest inside of the thermostat for the air conditioner. So it was boiling hot. We hooked up the generator, brand new Yamaha 3000 with the boost. Inverter generator is awesome. And it would basically, the air conditioning would shut off and then kind of turn on. And it got to a point where we couldn't set one temperature. I would have to move the little slider. It was one of those old school slider ones, not digital. And it was either full cold or off. That was all I was able to get out of it. And a very long story short, I pulled apart the thermostat and I found that a spider had made its nest on the electronics of the back of the circuit board, where that sliding rheostat was for temperature. And it basically had fouled up the electronics, and I tried cleaning it up the best that I could, but whatever the spider uses to attach its web to the electronics, it jacked up that thermostat completely. So we either had full cold or full hot, until I basically the next day pulled down a circuit board diagram and figured out how the cooling was controlled. And then I used a home thermostat because I had it with me. I was using it to tell the temperature inside of the camper. It wasn't hooked up, I just had it sitting in there to be able to tell digitally what the temperature was. And I was like, well, I've got this sitting here. So I hardwired that into the air conditioning system. As awesome as it is, the heat uses a completely different setup that you cannot manipulate a home thermostat to work the heat. You can manipulate it to work the cooling, but not the heat. So I either had to have the factory thermostat in the off position and the home thermostat in the cool position, and then we have air conditioning. But when we got in positions where we needed heat, we actually had to take the home to off and put the factory one from the Dutchman into heat, and then that would work. Totally crazy. So, when we say we were having temperature problems with the camper, those are the temperature problems that we speak of. Basically, we could go full-on frigid that first night, or no air conditioning at all. As soon as you went up the tiniest bit from full-on to try and be a little bit warmer, it would go. It would not go back on at all. It'd get 85 degrees. So that was that boat. And as far as the temperature in the truck that I talked about, the temperature issue that we had in our truck was that at that point we did not have air conditioning going back to the dogs. Eventually, when it is 80 degrees outside, it's at least 80 degrees in the cap of the truck, and I had zero desire to do that to the dogs. So we were pulling over at first and bringing the girls up front like they are right now, which is no big deal, but it was going to be a very big deal when we got to story. When we got to Oklahoma City, it was going to be a very big deal because my mother was going to be in the truck. At that point, that's a no-go. There was no way 3 Great Danes, 3 adults, and a baby in a big car seat were all going to fit in the cab of this truck. It was just not happening. So I pulled over. I want to go east. Okay. I pulled over and I fabricated a doggle. So what I did was I actually took the vent. There's a air equalization vent behind the back seat of a pickup truck, and that ensures that as you're trying to pump air from your air conditioning into the cab of the truck, that air's got a place to go because modern day trucks are sealed up so tight. So you have to have some way of letting that air exit. Well, back behind the back seat, there is a vent that allows air to eject overboard. So I removed that vent and I attached then I used a Sawzall and I cut a small rectangular opening in the bed of my truck. I really did not want to do that, but it was a dire situation where I had to figure out how to get air conditioning back to the dogs, and not like in a couple days. I needed it basically kind of then. So the 2 options I had come up with were go and buy the $500 back window, the pass-through back window, which would then allow us to open up a back window into the cap, which we still haven't done that. Lilith's about to say hello. Hi, baby Lilith. Or the alternative was this. This is what I came up with. Run an attachment onto a vent that would go over the armrest, down and underneath the back seat, then turn and go over to that equalization vent, and then through a hole that I cut into the bed of the pickup truck, and now I can pump air conditioning back to the dogs, which I did. And I gotta tell you, that worked really rather good. Do you remember? I was pretty impressed.
Yeah.
It worked pretty darn good.